AI for science that we got going here in Australia. I should point out there's actually a few different audiences on the call today. We've got probably mainly members of our GDG AI for Science community. We also have members of the internal Google Science Catalyst community, which is a group of Googlers who are pretty passionate about bringing our technologies into the science world. And we also have a bunch of guests from GDG Sydney, GDG Cloud Sydney, GDG Auckland, Wellington, and GDG Melbourne. So welcome all. I'm just going to very quickly introduce Paige, and Paige, you can do a better job of introducing yourself, I'm sure. But we're really lucky to have Paige Bailey with us today. Paige leads AI developer relations for Google DeepMind, and she's going to be walking us through, I guess, some of the tools that we're using in science across the board at Google. And I expect it to be a fairly interactive session, right, Paige?
Yes, definitely yes. I'm more of a fan of demos and questions and kind of collaborating together than just sharing slides. So hopefully folks will raise their hands. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll also be trying to monitor. And the ideal state at the end of this presentation is that you should come away with a whole bunch of insights, ideas for new tools or techniques that could be helpful for you in your research. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm also quite excited. Let me dial in. I am intending to take a cruise over the coming winter holiday through Australia and through New Zealand. So this is extremely exciting to be able to talk to folks who live there today. I'm also not seeing so for the companion mode, I'm not seeing this room show up as an option. Let me try logging in again. Otherwise, this presentation will just turn into interpretive dance, which is, I am positive, less interesting for everybody in the audience. Cool. So it's looking, let me try, we'll see. There we go. It's just being a little bit slow, unfortunately. So hopefully everybody can see. Hopefully everybody can see my slides. As mentioned, my name is Paige. I lead our developer relations team at Google DeepMind. It's a relatively new team, just created about a couple of months ago. Before that, I was leading product for Gemini models, as well as the Palm 2 models. I've spent my entire career basically working in research labs. Background is geophysics and applied math, and then kind of CS stuff and carbonate geology for grad school. So if you're part of the earth sciences contingent, we will get along famously. And if not, if you just enjoy science, we'll probably also be friends. And then I have worked at Google Brain, Google DeepMind, GitHub. Happy to talk through all of that as well. As well as Chevron. Chevron was my first role out of school. Cool. So generative AI is transforming everything we do at Google, how we build our products, including things that you might have seen in the news around our weather tooling, things like AlphaFold, all of the above. And we've been thinking about AI for a really long time. When I started doing machine learning, it was around 2009, so the world looked very different. And since then, we saw the release of machine learning frameworks, TensorFlow in 2015, PyTorch and JAX around 2017, 2018, maybe a little bit before. Torch, even before that, though it was implemented in Lua, so felt a little bit challenging to use for Python developers. And it's been really inspiring to see all of the different models that have gotten created over the years, how all of the machine learning frameworks providers have kind of learned from each other, their tools and techniques, how all of the models have built on each other. And then how all of that is kind of translated into what we have now today, and our latest model family at Google, which is called Gemini. And our most recent Gemini model release is Gemini 2 Flash. We'll be taking a look at it in a second. It's unique in the sense that it supports multimodal inputs. So it's natively multimodal. It understands video, images, audio, text, code, all of the above, all at once, PDF documents, basically anything you can throw at it. But it also supports multimodal outputs. And we'll take a look at that in a second. So as I mentioned, it supports many different kinds of modalities, including text, image, audio, video, code. And in the before times, you might have had different APIs or different models for each one of those use cases. So you might have had an API for vision, you might have had an API for video intelligence, you might have had an API to do translations. But today you can do all of the above all in one model. It comes in a broad variety of sizes. So Pro is kind of the largest one. It also has the highest latency, but it can do a kind of a sort of outsized work compared to some of its smaller brethren. Flash is the model that we use most commonly in production. It's extremely capable, very, very fast, very cost effective. Flash Lite is our recently GA'd tiny model. You can think of it as similar to the Flash 8B if you've experienced Gemini 1.5 Flash 8B, but the performance is exceeding the performance of 1.5 Pro. So in general, our models are getting smaller and smaller, but more and more powerful over time. And we envision that will continue long term. We also have a model version of Gemini called Gemini Nano, which is small enough that it can fit on Pixel and Android devices. So all of your processing, all of your data is analyzed locally. All of the inference is done locally. You don't have to send your data over the wire to a server somewhere. And then we also have it baked within our Chrome browser. So if you haven't had a chance to try it, I strongly suggest taking a look. This is, again, tiny version of Gemini on only around 1 to 2 billion parameters in size, but it can do things like language detection, translation, summarization, even things like code generation within the browser without having to send that data off device, which is pretty cool. We also have kind of an open source framework called MediaPipe, which allows you to embed all sorts of different models within browsers, including large language models, things like Gemma, or some of the smaller like Llama or Phi models. But you can put it all on device, and it supports everything from kind of these vision scenarios to audio classification, text classification, etc. And it's quite cool in the sense that for these models, so if I'm going to object detection, but also hand landmark detection. So these models that you see on the screen are running completely in the browser, which means that if I were to turn off the Wi-Fi for my laptop, it would still work. And it's using the GPU in my laptop for inference, which is pretty magical. Cool. You can also do things like segmentation. So if you wanted to be able to spot a person or draw kind of like an outline around a person or a specific object, and even things like hair segmentation, which always makes this always kind of convinces me that I should dye my hair blue, perhaps. But lots of different things. And again, as I'm talking, please feel free to raise your hand to ask questions if you think of anything that you would be curious about for your own research. So broad spectrum of model types, model sizes. The larger it gets, the kind of the more expensive, and then the smaller, as I mentioned. Small enough to run on device and obviously completely free because you're just using the hardware in your laptop or on your phone. Gemini 2 Flash, the best place to test it out is in aistudio.google.com, which we'll take a look at in a second. Feel free to follow along if you'd like to kind of test out some of your own prompts. And as I mentioned, it supports multimodal inputs, but also multimodal outputs. So this latest Gemini 2 model will allow you to generate text and code, but also images and also audio, including live streaming audio. And then we also have a thinking version of Gemini 2, which has the model kind of articulate its thoughts in real time. We'll take a look at that in a second as well. They've been doing pretty well on all of the leaderboards. So this is just LMSys from a few weeks ago. We've seen up to 10 million tokens supported within context for some of our largest series of models internally. And this is quite important because it means that you can analyze a lot of information right at inference time. And what I mean by this is that you can give Gemini, a video, multiple videos, many different PDFs, simultaneously large CSV files, large text files, all sorts of information, and say, hey, analyze it in this particular way. And instead of having to worry about retrieval or about fine-tuning or about breaking apart data into chunks that are a little bit easier to get into models' context windows, then you can just give it all to Gemini all at once. And 2 million tokens, even just 1 million tokens, translates to a lot of information. So it's all of the emails that you've sent in the last year, all of the text messages that you could send in a lifetime, multiple code bases, hours of video. If you downsample to 460p and remove all commercials, it's the entire first season of Silicon Valley, the TV show. Lots and lots of podcasts, lots of articles, and as I mentioned, you can just ask questions about these data, or use code execution to analyze it. So this is an example of something that you could do with a context window and with Gemini models that you wouldn't be able to do with competitors. You could sort of take a video of you encountering a bug on your laptop. You could add in a code base and then say, please fix this bug in the code base, and Gemini should be able to do that. The other interesting thing about having such a broad spectrum of model sizes, if you record everything that you do on your laptop 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, you could still use the flashlight model, which is around 7.5 cents per million tokens, and analyze all of your activities each week for less than the price of a fancy cup of coffee. So really, when you kind of understand the possibilities of these models, it unlocks a lot of things from the perspective of being able to analyze data at scale, but also being able to turn a lot of unstructured data into structured information. And as I mentioned, I am so much more a fan of demos than just kind of talking at people. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and zoom over to AI Studio. So just because I'm curious, how many folks have heard of AI Studio before? Just add like a little emoji. Few emojis, excellent. So this is great. And for folks on the call who haven't seen or heard of AI Studio before, then hopefully this will be interesting and new. So for AI Studio, it's the best place to get access to the Gemini models as soon as they come out. You can see here off to the right a bunch of different models that are added, that are kind of possible for you to use. You can also see kind of these tools off to the right, things like structured outputs, code execution, function calling, grounding with Google Search, and then also some safety settings, which you can turn on or turn off based on preferences. I usually find that turning them off means that it's easier to kind of experiment and to get intuition for how the model might perform. We also have a streaming real-time section where you can talk with Gemini Live. And if I'm brave, then we will try that. Though sometimes when you stress test it with large calls, the models have a problem trying to differentiate which voices are asking questions. And we also have a place where you can generate API keys. So if you hit create an API key, You can attach it to a GCP project or just kind of create one behind the scenes, and then your API keys are usable through all sorts of projects. You can also see utilization for your APIs by looking at usage data. And as mentioned, you can get started free of charge. We have a pretty generous free tier across all of our models. Cool. Another thing, if folks have had experience with the Vertex AI, Gemini APIs, now whenever you click Get API key and then also select Get Code, it's the Vertex but you don't have to adopt two different SDKs. So there's not one SDK for the developer APIs and one SDK for Vertex AI. We're all just one unified Gen AI SDK, which we will get into in a second. So how do you use Google AI Studio? Well, if I were to select a video from this sample media, so right here we see a video of a dinosaur because I really like dinosaurs. You can ask questions to the effect of, please create a table with timestamps for detailing each dinosaur that you see in this video. Make sure to also add a fun fact about each dinosaur. This is using Gemini 2.0 Flash, and I hit run. And you can see here off to the right that this 5-minute long video ended up being around 88,500 tokens. So still well within the 1 million token context window for Gemini 2 Flash. You can also see if you click Get Code, that it gives you the code that you would need to use in order to replicate what you just did within AI Studio in Python or in other languages, if you prefer other languages like JavaScript or Go or Swift or Dart. And then there's also, so hopefully you can see here a table that gets created, just being able to spot the different dinosaur types within the video and giving timestamps for each one. You can also do things like audio transcription. So if you wanted to, I'm going to test this out in real time. I have also just eaten some mango jerky, which is very, very delicious. I'm not sure if it's just a California thing or what, but it is very, very good. And I'm going to read it out into this record audio section. Ingredients: organic mango, made in a facility that processes soy, peanuts, and tree nuts, made in Mexico for Solely Inc. www.solely.com, certified organic by organic certifiers. And I'm going to add it to the prompt, and then you can say something like, please transcribe the audio clip below, including timestamps, and then hit run. And you can see ingredients: organic mango, made in a facility that processes soy, etc. It even captured my ums, and that was pretty quick. So that was the Gemini 2 Flash model. Gemini 2 Flash model, and Flashlight would be even faster and still able to do the same sorts of work. It works in languages that are not just English languages. So if you have other aspects that you would like to transcribe, we also have some starter apps available for you to understand the native capabilities of the models. So like if you pull in an image, you ask for 2D bounding boxes around specific features, specific items, it's able to kind of identify each one and then give you bounding boxes within the image. And if there were instances when I was working in the earth sciences where, you would have to specify segmentation for different rock types. And oftentimes if you were, using something like ArcGIS, that translated to a whole bunch of clicks. Or you had to identify all of the sea urchins or identify all of the different species of fish within a given frame or a given image or a given video. This is a lot easier than having to do all of that by hand if you could just kind of have this automatically created for you. I would imagine it might be the same in the biological sciences, to be able to find specific features or specific animals, specific types as well. Cool. So another thing that you can use Gemini for is, and let's use flashlight, is to give you, or let's use Flash for this one because I want to use grounding with Google search. You can give it insights into data that is more recent than the training data cutoff. And why is that useful? It's useful because, you know, these models, the process to create them is that you kind of take in a whole bunch of data for pre-training, you collect it all together, you structure it, you format it, and then you train it over a long span of time. And so whatever your training data cutoff is, when you gather all of the information and feed it to the model is probably not going to stop until 6 months, 9 months from now. So you could ask it a question, and the model thinks that it's a given date, you know, 6 months, 9 months in the past, unless you add something like search grounding or retrieval to give it insight into more up-to-date information. So if I were to ask Gemini something to the effect of who won the Best Picture award at the Academy Awards in 2025. It says, as my knowledge is only current up until June 2024, I don't have information about events that happened after that time. If I turn on this grounding with Google search, and then I run it again, Gemini pulls in information from various places around the internet, cites all of its sources, and then can give you those cited sources back. I used this as well because there's an iceberg that is close to the Falkland Islands. It's really it's the size of Rhode Island, but it was rumored to hit the Falkland Islands, impacting a whole bunch of penguin habitats. And so you could ask questions like, tell me the latest about the iceberg the size of Rhode Island. Is it going to impact the Falkland? Oh, amazing. I love that we have folks on the call who are experts who know the latest about the icebergs. Let's see. Approaching South Florida potential impact, possible future path, research. So hopefully it's caught on. But so far it doesn't say that it's been grounded. I wonder if I could be a little bit more specific. What's happening with iceberg A23A? Yep, there you go. Grounded near South Georgia Island. So it said near South Georgia Island, but it's grounded. Cool. Excellent. So in addition to grounding with just search data, you could ground with your own kind of internal data, your own proprietary data. You could also do things called like code execution. I'm not sure if folks have had experience with code execution in Gemini before, but let me turn on Pro and then turn on code execution. Code execution gives you the ability to have Gemini write, execute, and then recursively fix until it gets the right answer code for you. And what that looks like is something like this. So I could say something like, please create a cluster plot using the iris data from scikit-learn. Also give me some basic statistics and an overview of the data set, and then hit run. So you can see Gemini kind of building a plan, or at least like describing a plan to us. It creates some Python code, so it imports pandas, scikit-learn, matplotlib, the usual suspects. It generates some of the basic stats that I had asked of, and it also creates a whole series of cluster plots for each one of the dataset summaries. So it's pretty cool to see the generated kind of plots and outputs. I'm not sure. I guess I can zoom in a little bit so folks can see. And then you can have it rerun or continue running if you would like. You can also do things like function calling. So if you wanted to create specific functions and edit them with either a GUI or just plopping in some JSON code, you can ask for structured outputs. So like as an example, if I wanted to add an image or a video or just speak some words. So if I were going to say, Amelia Earhart flew out of Oakland, California in 1912. She was a pioneering aviatrix and was able to also fly out of New York in 1914. I don't know if any of that was true, but that the thing that I would like to test is so get names, so a string of names, get locations. So this would either be like, let's be specific and say city locations, and we can make it an array as well. Years, then make that an array, and click save, and then hit run. Yeah. So names, Amelia Earhart, years 1912 and 1914. So just being able to like describe the entity extractions you would like to have, and it can do it in kind of this nice stylized JSON format. You could also just ask like, hey, give me the names, and it would, but it's not like the nicely formatted JSON that you see here. Cool. Like I said, I'm just going to keep chugging along unless there's any questions. My assumption is that folks have already seen tooling like Deep Research, which is baked into the Gemini app. So AI Studio is not the Gemini app, but is using some of the same models behind the scenes. MCP servers you should be able to use with the Gemini APIs. One of my most favorite open source tools called Composio announced its MCP server support today. But MCP is an open standard, which means that you should be able to kind of mix and match with other APIs, tools, REST service calls, whatever you would like. And you can certainly mix and match the Gemini models with Composio's MCP servers. You can think of Composio as kind of an orchestration layer for all of the many different agent frameworks that exist today, like Crew AI, LangChain, Langsmith, Llama Index, all of the above. Cool. And speaking of agents, we also have, and we announced this just recently, an AI co-scientist, which is built using the Gemini models within DeepMind that kind of orchestrates this multi-agent system for effectively doing deep research, but doing it on scientific data, and then also coupling in code execution. And then Pascal asks, are you able to use MCP servers within AI Studio? So you can, in the sense that if you click this Get API key, you can use the API key that you generate to write code to interact with MCP servers. So you can't do it within the GUI, but you can use it within the context of, just authoring code using those API calls within Colab. Cool. Excellent. And then let me pull back the DeepMind multi-agent system. So you have different agents that you described just using Gemini 2 behind the scenes. They can do kind of ranking and execution of your different research experiments. So you can imagine coupling this with code execution is quite powerful in the sense that, you can ask Gemini to come up with, 5 or 6 different ideas for things that it could explore, ask it to go and independently research and execute on those 5 different ideas, and then come back to you with all of the results such that you could understand which are the best ones to potentially tackle in your own research. And this incorporates tools use, but also, like I mentioned, things like code execution, search and retrieval, and then also just using the model for prompting and for thinking. And Gemini is quite interesting in the sense that I'm going to pull up a thinking model. This is a thinking model that now is a little bit out of date. So this was the one that we released in January. But you can ask questions to the effect of, like, please create a Frogger clone using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Hit run. And then you see this little section that's a thinking section created behind the scenes before the model gives its customary output. If you expand out the thoughts section, you can see that it took my request. It recognized that it needed to decompose it. It had a technology choice, some core game logic, a game loop, movement, obstacle generation, winning and losing conditions, visuals and styling, implementation steps, code structure and organization, testing and debugging. And so if I were to take all of this information and I am going to use something called JS Fiddle, which is just a publicly available place for you to visualize HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. I'm going to copy the CSS. There we go. And then copy the JavaScript. Paste that in, hit run. You can see the little Frogger game clone that's playable and very fast moving cars. I am not good at this game. And as a result, my poor little Frogger, it looks like my lives have already been negatively impacted. But it's cool in the sense that even these basic applications, you're able to get started and get running very, very quick to have these basic implementations. You can also use things like, I'm not sure if folks have heard of Fragments, which is an open source library that just allows you to visualize apps very quickly. This one is using Gemini 2 Flash, but you could say something like, please create a marketplace app where I can sell all of my Pokemon cards, and then hit enter. It generates some code behind the scenes. As I mentioned, this one is using Gemini 2, but you can also add in a whole bunch of other models. It runs, and then it shows you this Pokemon card marketplace behind the scenes. You can click the little buttons, and it also gives you a URL that is unique that you can copy and then go see your Pokemon card marketplace. So it's quite quick to get started with the code that you would need in order to create applications. It's very Machop. That was not an anticipated, and it seems like there's a little bit of data problematic stuff in the sense that this is definitely not Pikachu, but but we will see. Cool. Pascal asked, is there any plan to add something similar to Claude's art? Stay tuned. Though as mentioned, you could just use something like fragments in the interim to replicate the experience of artifacts. But stay tuned. Cool. There's also streaming real time. The streaming real time allows you to ask Gemini specific questions. Usually this balks during GVC calls that are pretty big. So I will try it. And it might not work as intended. But I encourage all of you to experiment with it when you're not on large calls. Let's see. Hey, Gemini, could you please read out what you see on the screen? Yep. So that's the, I'm not sure.
Okay, I understand your.
Yep, there we go. So the let me present again so you could see. It was speaking, but it was speaking there we go. So it was speaking, but it was speaking through my laptop, and not through the phone call. But it's
sure. I see 4 different APIs listed. They are the Translator API, the Language Detector API,
the Summarizer API, and the Prompt API and extensions. Would you like me to go into any more detail about any of these?
So that's the sort of mechanism through which live stream works, is you can ask it a question in natural language. It understands kind of visuals of the world, screens that you show it. You can ground it with Google search as well. So you could ask it questions to the effect of tell me about the latest Academy Award winners. And there are a bunch of different voices that you can also use behind the scenes to support the live stream integrations. So strongly recommend testing out some of those. Cool. In addition to being able to sort of create text outputs, the latest Gemini models also support image editing. So let me pull up an example that we released on one of the Gemini Google for Developers channels. You can give Gemini a picture of a car and ask it to convert it into a convertible. You can give it a picture of a different image and ask it to modify the text, all sorts of things, which is quite cool, I would say. Excellent. And going back to the slide deck. So we also have an image generation model called Imagine. All of the images that you see on the screen have been generated with Imagine. You can guide it with kind of natural language descriptions and ask it to output images in a broad spectrum of styles. And then our VO model, which is sort of most recently released as an API through Google Cloud. It allows you to generate short custom clips of things like puppies or basically anything you can imagine. And you can seed these clips either with input images, kind of starter images for the 6-second chunks, or just describe in natural language what you would like to see. We also have a very generous Google Cloud startup tier. So if you're thinking about starting a company, this is something I strongly encourage you to investigate. summary of an image we give as input. So Theodore, yes. So if you give Gemini, so let's pull up Gemini Flash, and then I'll give it just an example image. So let's do this one. I love hiking trails. But you can say something like, please generate a long, detailed description of what you see in this image. And just like with the video example, Gemini kind of creates a detailed description. So it's a serene and lush forest scene dominated by a small wooden bridge, characterized by dense greenery. Floor is a mix of fallen leaves, dirt, and more greenery. Overall lighting is soft and diffused, etc. And if you wanted to do that programmatically, so if you wanted to run code that would take this input image and output, a similar sort of text string, all you would have to do is copy the code that's available under Git code. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's also quite nice in the sense that you can add system instructions or even just example images within your prompt. So you could say, here's an image of insect type 1. Here's an image of insect type 2. Here's an image of insect type 3. And then I ask Gemini to recognize specific insects within the context of an image. A person I was talking with just recently, they're using Gemini to be able to identify kind of how long it takes to drop off patients at hospitals. So they have kind of like a security video feed. And they can track how long it takes for the ambulance to arrive, for the patient to get wheeled into the hospital, and then for the ambulance to leave. And this is all just through natural language. You don't have to explicitly program any of those things. But it's quite nice as well in the sense that you could turn a lot of these like images into real structured data. And let me pull up the chat. So Pascal asked, do any of the models support generating an audio file containing speech from within AI Studio? So this does, Gemini Live does generate an audio file. So let me, and I believe this is the best place to do it, but you could just say, so you could say, describe the main plot of the play Fiddler on the Roof.
Fiddler on the Roof is about Tevye, a Jewish milkman in Russia, who is trying to...
Yeah. And so you can see the audio sample that gets created that you could download or just kind of extract out. And it also has the transcription for the audio file. Yes, so Jax and Colab are two different projects that are kind of available within Google as well. Let me pull up Colab as a standard environment. I'm not sure if folks have, I'm not sure if folks saw, but we just recently released a data science agent for Colab. Did folks see that? If not, congratulations, you're going to see it now. So if you click Show Gemini, you can see kind of a list of example activities that you can that you can use. You can also upload specific files. So let me pull in kind of an example for just a web scraping project that I was doing recently. And I could say, please summarize all of the issues that appear in the body column. Also give me some basic statistics about this data set. And we've integrated Gemini into Colab such that you can kind of pull in the files. It creates this task plan. You can execute the plan, and it generates code within the Colab environment for you. For folks who haven't experienced Colab before, you can think of it as kind of a Python notebook environment that's shareable, that is attached to arbitrary compute. So it could be either compute that's just CPU or also kind of GPU compute. It's executing on the task plan that it mentioned. So the data set that I uploaded, it pulled in the tasks, it converted it to a data frame. It did some data exploration. So it looked at the shape of the data and it sampled some initial entries. It also was able to identify the body column, which is hopefully folks on the call recognize this automatically as I was scraping some issues from GitHub to analyze them. It looked at some data analysis for the number of rows and columns. It pulls in some proposed solutions, and then also some insights into the column, and then key data analysis and findings. And you could even ask, like, all right, now please, so if I were going to add another code cell towards the end, and then say something like use Gemini to analyze or to summarize all of the examples in the body column for my data frame. It's able to pull in kind of some example text, and then even do text completions if you would like. Though this is using a dated version of the Gemini models. You can also see the files that get added dynamically within the file category. And if folks haven't again, just seen what you can do within Colab, you can change out the different runtimes, so use GPUs or TPUs, and you can also even do things like get access to the terminal if you're using Colab Pro. So code completion, code generation, data science agents, and then also things like, so as an example, if I were to generate, I'm trying to think of something that I could do very simply that would result in an error. Create a data set that is of normal distribution with 20,000 examples. And then cool, and then plot the data in X using Matplotlib. And then plot. Let's try that. So it has an error for incomplete input, and Colab now also gives you the ability to just fix errors or to explain errors if it's a little bit more complex. Cool. So JAX, which is kind of Google's chosen and preferred machine learning framework for all research and for production modeling, is quite awesome in the sense that it allows you to kind of build really performant models. So all of our Gemini models are built using JAX. And then in addition, it gives you the ability to deploy those models to any arbitrary hardware target, in addition to scale quite easily. So I don't have a JAX presentation to share today, but there are a number of user guides that I encourage everybody to kind of take a look at, that show you both how to get started with JAX, as well as some of the interesting features like random number generation, grad, and some of the other differences, and then also how to scale JAX across multiple accelerators. And if anybody has any questions specifically about JAX, I can definitely answer or contact the team to answer. One of the cool things about JAX is that you can implement your models using it, and then you don't have to change your code in order for it to run on GPUs versus TPUs versus any other kind of hardware target. So I know people run into problems with that quite often when they're using other machine learning frameworks. You have to write your code significantly to use GPUs versus TPUs. But for JAX in particular, you're able to kind of flexibly move from one target architecture to the other. Any other questions? I know this was probably a lot. If you have anything that you think of afterwards, always feel free to send me an email, which my email address is webpage@google.com. And I'd be happy to route or reroute to whoever might have what you're looking for. And yeah, so Pip asked, can you expand on additional tools that might interoperate with the AI co-scientist? So these would just be kind of agents-based tooling. And how many folks on the call have experimented with agents before? Few thumbs up. So agents are, you can basically just think of them as, if you've ever used Zapier or any of these other kind of like if this then that automation style tools, agents are just ways for you to write code and run it to accomplish a task. And so that Google search feature that I showed you is basically like a built-in Google search agent. It goes and retrieves data from a Google search result, it pulls it back in, and then it's giving the model the ability to analyze it and summarize it. Code execution, that's also kind of like an agent that can write, run, and kind of recursively fix code. You could also have kind of tools that go and retrieve data for you from a given data source, or that might run another model that you've created behind the scenes, or might run a function that you've defined as a tool that the model can call. So just think of tools like the same way that you would think of arbitrary tools that you would use in your own workflow. And Composio, the thing that I had mentioned before, the tools that it has at its disposal is everything from like GitHub to Jira to like the ability to write out data to a Google Doc, to writing out data to Google Sheets, to DocuSign, to adding tasks to Trello, to posting updates on a Slack bot or a Discord, all sorts of things. And Christopher asked, what is the best place with HIPAA data in AI Studio? If you're dealing with HIPAA compliant data, I would recommend using the version of AI Studio that is within Vertex, which supports HIPAA compliance. That is Vertex AI Studio, and it looks roughly identical to the AI Studio that I showed you before. For AI Studio data privacy, if you're paying for the APIs, all of your data is kept private. Let me try to find data practices. If you're paying for AI Studio, all of your data is kept private. And if you are using the free tier, then your data could be used for things like evals or debugging or troubleshooting. But if you're paying for data in AI Studio, all of your data is kept private, including like the data that you send for prompts or to the APIs. Are there any mitigations for prompt injections in place within AI Studio? So there are quite a few. So people have attempted to jailbreak the Gemini APIs in AI Studio before. And we do a lot of responsible AI red teaming to make sure that that those kind of attack vectors get burned down. But I think everybody is trying to minimize the likelihood of injection techniques. Cool. Any other questions? Comments? If not, as I mentioned, my email address is webpage@google.com. Always happy to answer questions or to brainstorm potential solutions if there's something that you want to try. And I strongly recommend, experimenting with the models, testing them out. It's really miraculous, honestly, to see. Like as an example, the thinking model's output token length is 65,000 tokens, which is almost an order of magnitude greater than some of the other options. And you can do a lot of really interesting things when your output token length is 65K. So I think there are a lot of really cool things that scientists could use and adopt. And as I mentioned, always happy to brainstorm opportunities too. Excellent.
Last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll just say thank you so much, Paige, for giving us your time today.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And by the way, folks, just on Codespaces, it's not generally available. They're still trying to figure out how to coordinate the trusted tested program. So it's not GA just yet.
No, but I will tell you that if you wanted to replicate a similar experience, you could do it today with the commodity Gemini APIs. You would just have to write some code in order to do it. Like the Notebook LM, if anybody's played with that, with the podcast generation from Notebook LM, all of that is just using the commodity Gemini 2 APIs.
I just saw a question come in about Nano.
Is it possible to fine-tune the Nano version on device with our own data? So you cannot fine-tune Nano, but you can use our Gemma model family. And we'll add a link to that as well. And Gemma, stay tuned for exciting Gemma announcements coming soon. And you can also fine-tune the Gemini models, but I would recommend testing with the Gemma model family first. Cool. Excellent.
Awesome. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.